Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Mailbag, the final episode of 2023. My name is Damo, and joining me, as he usually does, is Clarky. We've made it, mate. The final episode of the season. How does it feel?
We did it, and you know what? It's really good to end on a high. Melbourne have beaten Brisbane by 1 point in the dying moments of a game of the MCG, and therefore, in my eyes and in this podcast's eyes, have won the premiership. Congratulations to Melbourne. There will be no more football.
It was one of those games where if Melbourne lost it, they probably were at risk of falling out of the top four.
I think you know what. On the podcast I did with Lek this week, I did say get fucked Brisbane, which is all in good fun. But I actually think that Brisbane and Melbourne have reasonably similar issues in relation to the way that they lose games, and in some respects, the way that we both win games. It's usually, we have a pretty dominant win, or we somehow scrape across the line, or we do it to ourselves and lose. And Brisbane's fault of locking up in those last moments while Melbourne put the foot down because we had nothing left to lose is also pretty much exactly what happened in the round 2 game. So I don't think it was a 25-point swing both ways and then came back to literally the last 2 minutes of a game. So yeah, Brisbane people, I feel you. We both need new coaches.
Yeah, Brisbane, people say Brisbane can't play the MCG, but they were playing pretty well, and then they got out to a lead, and instead of building on the lead, they just kind of stopped trying to put the game to bed. But there was 7 minutes left when they were 4 goals up.
It was over when they moved Jack Gunston.
You can't do that. And as soon as they move Jack Gunston to defense, you know that they're trying to lock the game up, and putting Jack Gunston in defense means they've got no one to kick to.
That being said, Jack Viney literally taking the ball out of Oscar McInerney's hands made me erect. Anyway, SuperCoach happened as well.
SuperCoach did happen. I mean, I wish it didn't happen, but it did happen. People actually had pretty good weeks, regardless of all of the, carnage that happened. So many people had to exhaust all of their bench options and put them on the field just to have 22 players, and some people didn't even reach 22 players.
You know what I think is very funny? So this season was the first season that I encouraged my wife to play SuperCoach, and she's been having an okay year. She didn't really want me meddling in her team too much, so I kind of took my hands off and just kind of watch her naturally grow and give her advice when she asks. This week, she said, "Oh, I'm going to put the VC on Tim English, and then, I'll put the C on someone else after seeing that game." Tim English comes out and scores a 173. And she was like, nobody's going to beat that. I was like, yep, I got the VC on English as well. You always take 173. There is zero reason to ever not take 173. But I did give her the caveat. I said, I guarantee somehow someone is going to score more than English just because that's how the universe works. And lo and behold, on the Friday night, Max Gawn comes out with a 215, which once again, erect.
We had Pistol on the mailbag last week. He messaged me after that game on Friday.
Yep.
And so it was Friday before the Melbourne-Brisbane game, and he said, "At least we got the English VC correct." And then at 8, and then at 10:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, he sent me another message. Spoke too soon.
Correct.
And all I said was English VC was correct. We told people to put the VC on English, and that would have panned out for a lot of people. What was the questionable part? What was the questionable part? Was we told people to trade Gawn for English. That advice didn't age well.
Look, you can't predict a fabled 200-point game. You can't predict that. And I'll be honest as well. Look, regardless of what information we gave people, I'm going to go ahead and say it. If you were convinced that you were going to trade Gawn, you were already going to do it before we told you to. So I'm not taking responsibility for that. Those that held rewarded in this instance, and that's what we love about this beautiful game.
And at the time, we didn't know that Brody Grundy was going to be dropped. Like there was whispers of it, but no one actually knew.
Oh yeah, pulling back the curtain, listeners, we record before teams because we want to get this out in a timely fashion where you can make your choices based on information you have. It turns out we're wrong anyway.
Clarky, so this is the final episode of the season.
Correct.
Which means we probably need to reveal what we're doing at for next season. But let's leave that until the end of the podcast because that's how you get people to listen to the whole thing.
Suckers, the lot of you. We'll see you we'll see you at the end.
It's been a very good year. We've had some very good guests. We've had the Hipster. We've had the Phantom.
Great guest.
We've had Al Paton.
Wonderful.
MJ from the coaches panel came on a couple of times.
Huge. I love MJ.
SuperCoach with DR came on.
What a legend.
Rather, DR himself came on. We had Janath Fernando from SuperCoach Swordplay.
Beautiful man.
We had Patto from the SuperCoach co-captains.
What a guy.
We had Ben from SuperCoach Insider. He came on a few times earlier in the season. We had
right.
Swiz from SuperCoach Insider come on a couple of times.
Great man.
It's been a good year with some very good guests coming on, all with different angles that they attack SuperCoach at. They had different ideas to everyone's questions every single week. And I don't know about you, but I now think about things in other people's mindsets. Like, there will be trades that I think about and I go, what would MJ do? What would Ben say? What would Al say? What, like, these, like, you meet people and you hear their ways of thinking and you kind of bank it all in your head. And then now you look at a trade 100 different ways. And it's almost a case of, what is the weighting? Like, how bad can this trade be? Like, if I hearing a bad reaction from more people than I'm hearing a good reaction from, based on what I know these guests would say, maybe it's probably not a good trade.
Yeah, and I think we know as a community, I think, that diversity is really what makes the SuperCoach community great. It's not it's not necessarily the rivalries or the competitiveness or the ranking or anything like that. It's just the amount of people who have such interesting ways of building their teams, of looking at their trades, of, upgrading their cadence. I mean, like, SuperCoach Mumma, Cam, Pistol, MiniMonk, Benton, the Hipster, all these people are just so different in the way that they approach it, and that's what we love, and that's what makes it really, really fun to collaborate with so many of these people. Whether you take it on, consciously or subconsciously, you start to integrate that new level of thinking, and like you said, that new perspective of, maybe you don't make a mistake that you maybe would have made if you had no input. And we love that, and we'll do that more, hopefully, at some point, but you'll find out at the end of the episode.
So, to thank our guests, we have asked a selection of them to send us through some audio of them answering some questions to do with their season and also looking towards next season. We're well aware there are 6 weeks left, but we weren't going to come back just to do this at the end of the year. So we are doing it now. Some answers may find themselves out of date in a few weeks' time. Some might cement themselves more. But we've asked Patto, Lekdog, Ben, DR, and MJ to answer these questions. So the first question that we asked was, who was your best starting selection?
My best starting pick this year was probably Errol Goulden, considering the value and his keeper status. Special shout out to Will Setterfield as well, who at his price did a great job early days before getting injured.
My best starting pick is easy. Marcus Bontempelli. He was locked into my team from the second team picker opened. Had him in for a huge year, and at time of recording, he's the number one ranked SuperCoach option. Came in relatively underpriced as well at 640 odd K, averaging 128. Has been a regular vice captain loophole for me. Marcus Bontempelli is definitely my best pick.
Best starting pick, probably Zeeble and the Setter Goat. Now, I know they didn't last for the whole season, but they definitely got me a lot of good points early, made some cash, and I was able to move around them. So I definitely enjoyed studying them this year.
Now, it's a pretty easy question because I had a terrible starting side. Most of the blokes that I'm looking at now on my screen have actually been traded in, but one bloke that's been there since day dot has been in my captaincy loop basically each and every week. He's only gone under 100 once for the season. We did have to pay up at the start of the year, but it was worth each and every penny, and that's the Bond. You just cannot fault this bloke this year. As I mentioned before, very regularly in my loop, I did really catch that nice 182 against Freo. Also got a 164 against the Giants, and isn't it just fantastic when you nail that captain for the week? So Bond, I just cannot go past. And I know he's got some pretty stiff competition from a bloke named Nick Dacos this year, but I think that he's in with a red-hot chance of taking home Charlie this year, and I really hope that he does. I'm a massive fan of the Bond, has not let me down, an absolute beast of a man.
My best starting squad pick this year, I'm probably going to say it's Tim English. There was a lot of debate about whether or not you do a set and forget structure of English and Marshall. Do you take on a Darcy as their value of Grundy? And is there anything in that mid-range that people liked the look of? But Tim English has not let us down all year. He started over the first 6 weeks going at an average of 137.8 with a lower score of 131. He's had 10 scores over the year over 130, and his lowest score to date is just 88. If you started with Tim English, you've had a ripping captaincy, vice-captaincy option almost every single week.
Now, Clarky, there's no secret here. I have had a terrible year. A lot of my best selections that I currently have, I didn't start. My best starting selection, and this is going to sound very strange, my best starting selection is probably Rory Laird.
Huh.
And I know what you're thinking. He scored 50 first up, and
Yeah. That's the
was
half.
and was very disappointing after round one. But from round two onwards, he's almost been like a permanent vice captain option.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of his season. We've got here currently 4 scores below 100, including that 50 from the first game, and you take that from any premium. I think it's easy to beat yourself up on the price, but the longevity of Rory Laird, who unfortunately this week is under a bit of a wait and see about his shoulder, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a really good one to cop. Cop one bad score for a season of prosperity. It's not a bad deal.
Who was your best starting pick, Clarky?
It's hard to decide. I think I've got Rory Laird. Rory Laird was in my starting side, and as I agree with you that I'm very happy that I went down that route. Tim English has been super consistent, and I'm really glad that I've managed to just go, yep, like that one was okay to go with the crowd because there was merit to the reasons why he was picked. But if I have to be perfectly honest, my favorite and, in my opinion, pick that has paid off the best has been Errol Goulden. I was very hot on this young man in the preseason of what he could do, and let's be honest, he didn't set the world on fire. In the first half of the season, he had some really good scores mixed with some okay scores mixed with some okay, what's happening there? Is this concern scores? But then he's had multiple games of 150 plus scores, including recently. If you include recently a Richmond 143 as well, is pretty close enough, and he's really broken out. Like, I've copped those bad scores. He's broken out, and he's firing on all cylinders. So I'm very happy that I stuck with him.
The next question that we asked was, what pick surprised you the most?
The pick that surprised me the most this year was probably Jack Bytel, who actually looked really good in a midfield role tagging Caleb Sarong in round 1, all to be dropped, play a handful of games as sub, and then find himself in Ross Lyon's doghouse. Not the last that will end up in that doghouse. Harry Sheasel surprised me a little as well. He played about 15 minutes at halfback in pre-season against Richmond after being drafted as a midfielder and ended up being a semi-primo for us in that halfback role.
The pick that surprised me the most this year was actually not a primo, not a underpriced guy, or as in a 200k guy that missed all of last year. It was actually Liam Stocker, who wasn't super duper cheap, and I didn't really want him in my team, but it sounded like St Kilda were actually going to use him, and he said he was going to buy into playing in the defense, so I gave him the option. I put him in my team. At this point in the year, he's averaging 68, but I traded him out in round 11, where he was averaging 75.3 points per game. He had a high of a 103, at a low of a 58, but most of his scores for the year at that point were in the mid-70s, and he was a really valuable contributor. Was able to have him on field over some of the other rookies that other people had, Campbell Chesser, etc. So he was a super-duper value pick for me. One I was very, very happy with and very, very surprised with. I sort of put him in the last minute and just didn't expect anything, but he's been very, very good.
The player that surprised me the most, probably, I'd say Dacos, as far as I didn't have him in my team initially, and he's just gone gangbusters. Brought him in round 3 because I had to, and he just has not let up. Him and Goulden. Now, Goulden had a really good preseason game, and I thought, I'm going to pick him because he's fairly highly owned, but he has not disappointed with some of his high ceiling games. I think he has definitely surprised me as well.
What prick, jeepers. I can't edit this. What pick surprised you most? This was a bit of a hard one, but again, if I look at my side here, I can see sitting at D2, Big Kizza Briggs. Now, I traded him in hoping for a bit of a quick cash grab, planning on trading him out just before his buy, but I tell you what, in the end, I decided to hold this bloke. Super surprising. I was hoping that, hey, if you can average 80, that'd be nice. Flip him, get another bloke in. Happy days, hunky-dory. But his scores for the year, 109, 102, 128, 114, 129, has slowed up in the last 3 with an 87, 107, and his lowest score of the year last week with a 79. But all in all, his season average is 107. So what do I pay for him? 254k. What an absolute bargain. If you can pay that much for your R2, then you are absolutely laughing. So
the pick that most surprised me this year, I know it sounds crazy to mention it now, but Nick Dacos getting to the territories where he is. To be at time of recording averaging 123.8. To be the far and above best SuperCoach defender in the game. It's just unheard of for second-year players. Yes, we've seen Clayton Olivers and Nat Fifes and Jackson McRae types all turn into premiums in their second seasons, but not at this tier, not at this level. So is it surprising that Nick Dacos has been a good SuperCoach player for us this year? No. But at this tier and level that we find him right now, absolutely. The 3rd highest scorer in the game. The 4th highest averaging player in the game. I knew Dacos would be good, but I'm surprised and pleasantly surprised as an owner with just how good he has been.
Which pick surprised you the most, Clarky?
I think it would have to be the starting pick that surprised me the most was Will Setterfield. Back when he was in my team, obviously rip in peace, Will Setterfield. But he started out pretty consistently for someone who we kind of took a punt on. we really didn't know what to expect from the midfield and how much mid time he was going to get, and he was really serviceable. He made his cash quickly, and I think I turned him into Marcus Bontempelli or Lockie Neal, looking at my team now, pretty quickly because of that.
See, the pick that surprised me the most, and this is probably going to be, this is a sad surprise.
No, sad surprise.
I started Nat 5.
Oh.
And I wasn't expecting to pay $300,000 for someone who was going to come out and average 120 again. But I wasn't expecting him to have fallen off the cliff as far as he had. He was like, I only had him for the one game at the beginning of the season, so I'm only technically able to answer this question. But when he came back, he struggled to even score 60s. And like, this is a dual Brownlow medalist who has plied his trade in the midfield. He's averaged 120. Like, he's never been a durable guy, so he wasn't someone that we would have been able to keep or rely on long term. But the fact that he's over the cliff that far that he can't even get 60s now or stay on the park to get 60s, I think that's what surprised me the most. I think that was a sad surprise.
Yeah, I think as well, it's going to be even sadder when Justin Longmuir at some point gets his big cartoon gun and old yellers him.
I think, see, when Nat 5's injured, he's always on the bench talking to the players. He's either or in the box relaying messages down to Justin Longmuir, who's on the bench. Like, they usually swap. So I think that he's got a role at the club even after his playing days. It's just a matter of how quickly that comes, because he has signed a contract extension. So they obviously think that he can get back to where is serviceable for the team. But who knows how long until he decides that it's the end and he needs to move on to something else.
Heaven, yeah.
Football heaven.
Football heaven.
Who is your first pick in 2024?
My first pick for 2024 is probably Disco Dacos, assuming he holds on to defence status next year.
My first picked player in 2024, it's easy to say some of these primos, your Dacos, your Bonds, etc. I'm actually going to be looking for value. I think that's what set me up to succeed this year was value points on field. I'm looking through the players that have missed this year. Zach Williams, this year came in at 425k. Obviously, he's been out for the year. Next year, he'll come in sub 400k. Be very cheap for a best 22 player that has upside, obviously injury risk. And Nick Naitanui, again, missed all of this year. He'll come in at sub 500k. I think finding value on the field is important. Nick Nat might not be the one, but I think Zach Williams is certainly an option for my first picked player next year.
First picked in 2024 has to be Tim English. If he stays fit and healthy and plays every round this season, he's hard to ignore because I can't see any other ruck around him that's going to give me the same output, whereas there's a lot of value in a lot of other lines, I think.
I did say that the Bont had some pretty stiff competition to take home the Brownlow this year, and I'm taking home his competitor next year, absolutely starting with this bloke, probably my first lock, and that's going to be Nick Dacos. Now, I'm assuming that he's obviously going to have defensive status. We know that the forward line is going to be really, really bare next year with blokes like Taranto, Dunkley, etc., being pure midfielders. So the fact that we can hopefully select this bloke in our backlines next year is absolutely phenomenal. He, again, just really hasn't failed this year. A couple of rounds in 7 and 8, he went a 72 and an 81. But if you take a look back right from round 1, 129, 149, 109, 151, 128, 145. Started like a house on fire, currently playing like a house on fire as well. Season average of almost 124. This bloke is in prime condition and he will be, I think, a generational player. So
Look, maybe it's recency bias. And to be honest, it's kind of hard not to be when you score 215. But my first picked for 2024 on the provision that Brodie Grundy moves on from the Melbourne Football Club, will be to start Max Gawn. At time of recording, priced at an average of 101, which we know is 20 points of value already. So if Brodie Grundy moves on and Gawn goes back to sole ruck, he's not going 200 every week, but we know 115, 120. I think he can emulate the style of season that Tim English has given us this year. If it's not him, it's probably Touk. Injuries made it hard for him this year. You could probably throw a Callum Mills or even a Sam Walsh in there. But if I was to pick one and to go a bit different on the provision that Grundy is moved on from the club, then I'm going to find it very hard not to pick him first. Also, Harley Reid, really good.
Who is your first pick in 2024? The easy answer is Nick Dacos, isn't it? But is that the best answer?
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Nick Dacos is the first picked in 2024.
Followed closely by Tim English.
I'm keeping a close eye on the ruck merry-go-round. Because if Port Adelaide get rid of Lyset and Teakle and Hayes and trade in Jordan Sweet as their number one ruck, we could have an R2 less than 200k who could average 80.
I can't believe that we're discussing this early.
Hey, I've got
This is usually February discussion.
Hey, I've got my ear to the ground, and I'm not saying that this is a done deal, but there's been too many reports about it for it not to be something to talk about.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, Clarky, your answer is Nick Dacos?
Yeah, followed closely by Tim English.
Okay, very good.
Well, actually, sorry, I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to pick Nick Dacos because we don't pick players over 700k, and he is definitely going to be top price for the year.
No, I think you definitely picked Nick Dacos. And the fourth question that we asked, which was the last question of the bunch, was which player will you be less inclined to pick next season?
I feel like we all say this every year, but the player or players I'll be less inclined to pick next year are the ones who always end up missing time through injury. Guys like Doherty, Darcy, Callum Mills, those sort of guys. Targeting the value without the injury risk is absolutely key.
I don't have a specific player off the top of my head that I don't want to pick next season. I stuck to my guns this year and I didn't pick any defenders above 600k. In fact, I didn't pick any above 550k. I said the same about forwards. I think in most cases, the player's price is going to rein in from that starting 600k. So I'm going to avoid basically all of those players. If you have to press me for someone specific to avoid, oh, that's tough. That's tough. I'm going to say Clayton Oliver. I don't know why. I probably will pick him, but theory being, all right, now we've seen that he actually isn't human. Is this injury, this continuing injury, the beginning of the end? We may not actually know how he returns before next season. We'll be playing on hope, history, and reports that he's had a strong preseason. He might be one that we need to watch.
The player I'm less inclined to pick, probably Ridley. I thought he was going to break out this season to the Ridley of old, but with Redmond and a few of these other, coaching changes as far as role and the rest of it, I will not start him next year or ever again.
Now, this hurts because I absolutely love this bloke and he's been great for us. Maybe not last year, but definitely the last couple of years before that. And it's the man of steel, Jack Steele. Now, unfortunately, I had to take his symbol away on the stock market video. I just could not give him the SuperCoach cape. The week after goes a 140 plus and then gives us a 105 the last week. But all in all, this has been extremely disappointing. Only hit the ton 4 times. We know what his strengths are. He's a beast. He's a tackler, contested pill, just so super strong. But the 2023 version of Jack Steele isn't quite like that. Ross wanted the Saints to be a running side. Steely's lost a lot of weight, lost a lot of that bulk, and lost a lot of that strength. So I'm not up for a Jack Steele that isn't in there contesting the peel and absolutely dominating that contested possession and tackling like a madman. A slight comeback, as I mentioned, over the last 2, but all in all, a bit of a failed season for the man of steel. I'm hoping he can come back, and so will St Kilda supporters, but yeah, at this stage, will not be considering him next year. And that hurt.
One player I'm less inclined to select in 2024, especially in my starting squad, is Tim Taranto. He's been stunning for us this year in the forward lines, and outside of a Dunkley, Goulden, Rosie, Butters, he's been the best forward for us this year. His consistency of scoring and some ceiling that a lot of us didn't predict to come has been evident. But for me, as a midfield-only option, I don't see him ascending to the heights of the big scorers in SuperCoach. And I'm talking about guys that have 120 potential. Bontempelli, Oliver, Dacos, Dunkley, Petrarca, Dawson, Merritt, Liberatore, Laird. I'd still probably put Neil ahead of him. Gosh, even the potential of young stars like Goulden, LDU, even a Noah Anderson and Tuke Miller. And why not another? Even Callum Mills or Jack Steele. These are a bunch of names that I all think are comparable or better, either in scoring potential or value on the dollar, in contrast to Tim Taranto. And so as brilliant as he's been for us this year, we need to enjoy these next few weeks of 2023, because in 2024 he's a mid-only, and I just can't see a narrative of him getting 120 consistently, and especially picking him at a potential top-end price when we'll have great value through the mids from premium proven performers, let alone the guys that have done it big in 2023. So, sorry, Double T. I love you. You've been great for me this year, but I'm not really that inclined to pick you next year.
And this is quite easy for me. I'm not picking any St Kilda player next year.
Yeah, if Ross Lyon's still there, avoid him. Jack Sinclair, see ya. Put him in the bin. I'll probably avoid Stephen Canelio as well. And Tom Green.
Yeah. I mean, Stephen Canelio will lose his forward eligibility, and that was probably the most attractive part of him this season. Next season, he'll probably be mid-only, and that probably removes the most attractive aspect of
Yeah, I'm going to go back to being
his
sad
selection.
and picking Josh Kelly.
If he could stay on the park, he
He's
would
just-
be an
he's
amazing
got the ceiling.
pick. But the thing is, you can't trust his body. He's one of those players who is the perfect bench option. But you're never going to get. But he's always 600k at the wrong
Yeah.
time of the year.
Agreed.
Clarky, should we get into some community
Yeah, let's
questions?
do it.
Some viewer
Let's
questions?
do
some listener
one
questions?
more set of questions for the year. This is your question Christmas, SuperCoach listeners.
The first question comes from Benno. Benno, you always support the podcast,
Benno.
and we love you for that. He says, "Thanks for an entertaining year, gentlemen. Amazing content. Do we have any further information on DCAM, or is he or Zeeble worth burning my last trade?" We don't have any further information than we had last week for either of those players. But DCAM was only slated to miss 1 week with his back injury. I don't know if it's worth using a trade on.
Yeah,
for either
I'd
of
probably
them.
hold steady unless there's other news that comes out tomorrow or Friday. Just keep an eye on it, but I think generally they made it pretty clear that he was only going to miss the one game, Darcy Cameron. So yeah, hold fast.
And his second question, he's
Two.
asked two. What are some great budget buys in the 350 to
let's
500k
go.
range? He hasn't mentioned a position, so we can look at a lot of players. And when I say a lot of players, it's
Damo,
there's
put some
actually not a
Prices
lot of
Right
players.
showcase music in the background here.
Let
Sam
me have a look.
Flanders.
I'm just moving the sliders up and down just to see.
Now
who
that
comes
Stuart
up in the
Do is
filter.
in football heaven, where he belongs. Sam Flanders is 427k, scored 125 points in round 18, had a really nice roll, and there's a 3-round average of 111.7. I like that. That's good. That's good diddly-good. Graham Myers is playing a very messy like performance. It's got 120, 3-round average of 108.3, but will occasionally score a game of like 30.
Let me put forth to you Daniel Rioli at $486,000. He scored 129 against West Coast and 95 against Brisbane 2 weeks beforehand, and 103 and 91 against St Kilda and Fremantle, respectively. He's averaging 95 on the dot for the year and has a 5-round average of 95.
That's good. I like
Consistent.
that. Who else we got? I don't like that. No, not Luke Shuey. Will Powell, 103 3-round average. Has the ability to score over 100, but he's a fun pick. He's not a good pick, but he's a fun one. Seems to be benefiting when he's got the specific role that he doesn't always have. But once again, Stuart Dew, gone. Out the window.
And Nazaya Wanganeen Malera is still
And he's
under
a good boy.
500k. He's not going to blow the roof off the joint, but he seems to be the only St Kilda player actually playing football at the moment.
That's
I think that covers some
Toby
good
Green.
options for you, Ben.
Toby Green is a fun
Take
pick.
your pick.
Throw that. I'm just going to throw it in there. He could score like 300. He could score like
Until
300
he gets
points
suspended.
1 week just because.
True. Until he
Hasn't
gets
happened
suspended.
yet. Still time though. I
Yeah,
know.
being captain has kind of
He's a
changed
good
him
boy
up, and I kind of
now,
like it.
Kind of. He's got a weird face though. His cheeks are
Okay.
too big for his head.
Next
Have you
question.
not noticed this? Anyway, sorry.
Clarky, we're moving on. Next question comes from Fraser. His question says, I'm in a caretaker role for my late grandfather's team. Wanted some advice. He's got 110k in the bank, 4 trades left, and full primo, but Sheasel is on the field. Is it worth luxury trading Sheasel, or 2 trades OMAC to English, or holding altogether?
Really sorry to hear about your grandfather passing, and definitely send my best wishes to you and your family in a difficult time. Look, trades are worth their weight in gold at this time. Having Oscar McInerney isn't great, but is serviceable, and same thing with Sheasel. So I think probably making a call here on doing Oscar McInerney, 112 last round, has a decent run-ish. Like, he's got Geelong, which isn't going to be good, but it's at the Gabba, so that's kind of good. Then they've got Gold Coast, Freo, Adelaide, Collingwood, St Kilda. It's hard for me to not like Harry Sheasel, though. But I think he's...
I think you hold Sheasel, and I'm not against a holding OMAC either. He hasn't had an awful year, but it depends who's on the field with him. If it's OMAC and Rowan Marshall, then you definitely need to get English. If it's OMAC and Gorn, I think he can hold. If it's OMAC and Briggs, you probably need to move one or the other to English. You're probably going to get similar results from OMAC and Briggs for the rest of the year. So I think it depends who you've got in that second position. If it's OMAC and Wits, you probably hold again.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with that.
So hopefully that gives you an answer, Fraser. Sorry for your loss.
don't leave this in, but did you get the email? We've got 2 emails. Yep, cool.
I did.
Sorry, I forgot to send them to you. No, 1. The
What,
guy
we have
from
2?
Peter.
Okay. Yes. Very good. Yeah. Our next question, and our last question actually for the episode, comes from Peter. He says, "Greetings from Carmel, Indiana."
That's it.
Clarky, we're
We're
worldwide.
globetrotting.
His question is options and timing for final premium defender trade. He can make a couple of trades to bring in a bubble rookie and 1 primary defender. If he trades this week, rather, I forgot if I'm reading this in his voice or my voice. If I trade this week, I can bring in either Houston or Ryan, or I could wait on Sicily to fall in value. I already have Dacos, Stewart, Dawson, Sinclair, and Day. What do you think about Houston, Ryan, Sicily, or other options? Thanks. I think Dan Houston at all cost. Get
Yeah,
him.
that makes the most sense to me, and it gets you to your full premium defender. That's probably what I would do if it were me.
And the quicker you can finish your team, the faster your team is going to rise up the rankings if it's not already there. So I think get Houston while he's got his hot hand, while he's on his run, while he's in his purple patch. Luke Ryan, with Brandon Walker now injured, I don't know what role Luke Ryan will have. He might have to play on small forwards or rotate onto small forwards, which would probably affect his scoring. And people have worked out if you put your athletic medium forward on James Sicily can't score points.
Yep.
That's all the questions for today. We should probably talk about our vice captains and captains for the week before we reveal what we are doing next season.
Are we not doing Mama's question?
Okay, yep. All right. A bit of a throwback to, was it last year that we were asked this question? SuperCoach Mama asked us in one of our very first episodes, who has the best hair in the AFL? We were pretty unanimous in saying Alex Pearce, although you put in an honorable mention for Ben Brown when he had his sideshow hairstyle. I think there's a challenge
couple of
now.
challenges.
So, SuperCoach Mama specifically wanted to draw out attention to a picture of Ocean Mullins playing with his hair untied at the Geelong Cats training. And his locks are flowing.
It's honestly beautiful. I think Alex Pearce is in trouble. It's giving power metal. It's giving hardcore rock on vibes, and I love that. So we'll tweet this photo.
I think he's in
Go
trouble.
look at it. We're tagged in it.
I think he's in trouble, but I also think that we should talk about some other haircuts as well. We watch The Simpsons. You know Wendell from The Simpsons?
Yeah,
you know that
I'm aware of
pasty
Wendell,
white kid
yes.
from The Simpsons? Do we reckon Tim English has that haircut?
Oh, Jesus. Yes, he does. Kind of.
I don't know if that's the best hair in the AFL, but I think it's the most impressive hair in the AFL.
While I see your Wendell, and I raise you, Will Ashcroft. This man legitimately looks like Prince Charming from Shrek 2. And it's insane.
Yes. There are some challenges. Alex Pierce has some challenges, and we've got Bailey Smith's mullet as well. That's gotten longer. That's
Very
now
good.
like halfway down his back. That's
I'd like
impressive.
to also raise one. Have we got like we've got like Hall of Fame haircuts? It's the Hall of Losers haircuts because I want to talk about Rory Lobb. Rory Lobb, what are you doing? Dye your hair again. Are you just like a normal man now with your regular coloured hair, and you went for years having the blonde top or whatever the hell you were doing? At least you were interesting then. Dye it back. I know you listen. Enemy of the show.
I would argue that Rory Lobb was never interesting.
Vendetta.
But anyway, let's not talk about Rory Lobb. Do you want to know who has a good hairstyle? Tom Liberatore. Especially when he pairs it with the mustache, he looks good.
I always forget what I am and aren't allowed to say on the podcast, but I definitely will say Tom Liberatore's haircut definitely looks like a man who has possibly seen some illicit substances in his lifetime. He looks...
Well, no one really knows what he did after that 2016 grand final because we saw pictures flowing through where he was in Europe at some stage, and then he was suiting up in Bali for a football team, and then he was somewhere else randomly. I just don't know if I just don't know if he. But no one really knows where he went after the 2016 grand final. That's all I'm going to say. Let's just say he had the time of his life after winning that flag, and why wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd also like to put in a honorable mention to Zach Tui, because obviously he had his milestone game recently, overtaking Jim Steins, which is absolutely wonderful for the legacy of Irish players. And Zach Tui is a wonderful man. I think he's had a very significant glow up during his AFL career, to the point where he is currently one of those AFL players that's just so distinctive, so cool. Like you look at him, you go like, yeah, this is a guy. Like this is a good dude. I love this dude. Really good boy energy, and I want to give him an honorable mention.
So there you have it. Football players with good hair. That's all the questions for today. Before we end off, we should run through our vice captain and captain for the week. Clarky, Essendon face Western Bulldogs at Marvel Stadium on Friday night. And my vice captain is probably playing in that game. In fact, you'd say 99.9% sure he's playing in that game unless something happens that we should not speak about.
Oh, I was
Bontempelli.
There's a lot of options in this game because I think Tim English could also be worth a selection depending on what's the current state of the Essendon Rock situation. Is Sam Draper still dead?
Phillips is no longer suspended. Draper is still dealing with a back injury. Zach with a back injury? Sure. A back injury. And Zach Bryan exists for some reason.
So yeah, possible Tim English. Yeah, Bont, Tim English, Zach Merritt, probably in that order, would be my three from this game.
And if you really don't care about your team anymore, Tom Liberatore as a vice captain as well is also an option.
Like Tom Liberatore, he's been doing it this year. Like another 149 this week just gone. He's thriving.
Can we talk about that just for a second? Like against Sydney, he had 6 disposals in the first 6 seconds, including the opening
Absolutely,
goal.
I don't understand this. It just out of nowhere. And if you're an owner, pat yourself on the back. You did a good job this year. If you started him, that's a good start.
I didn't start him, but I traded him in. I talked myself into him.
Moving on from that, I think Dunkley or Neil.
I'm going Dunkley against the Cats at the Gabba.
Yeah, I think that's smart.
And I don't really have a backup option after that.
Yeah, I mean, Errol Goulden has just been getting it done. Nick Dacos against Port. Port don't really tag, do they? Not as far as I'm aware. I've never noticed it.
And Darcy Byrne-Jones will miss with concussion as well, so their primary tagging option for that halfback role is not playing either. So
Yeah,
that
GWS,
could be another option.
Gold Coast, nothing there really. Melbourne Crows, Petrarca, Gorn against Riley O'Brien, maybe. Rory Laird, but
If you're desperate, Rowan Marshall against Tristan
I'd
Sherry
probably be
might
concerned
be good
about
as
Rory
well.
Laird or Jordan Dawson. They might get Sparrow or possibly like a Viney type running on them, one of them for this game, just to sort of keep them quiet because there's no Rochelle for this game either. So there's no real other option. So it's going to be one of them who's going to cop it. So maybe get your captain in earlier. Yeah, we did it.
All right. So next year, it's already been revealed that Lekdog and Patch will no longer be creating content for people to read and listen to.
Yeah.
Clarky, the mailbag will continue, but not in the format that
That's
it's
right.
currently in.
We live, bitches, but there will be some changes.
There will be some changes. So this podcast has sort of acted as maybe a window into what we're going to be talking about. It's going to be a football SuperCoach podcast where we kind of talk about both sides of the coin. And we will have our own handle on Twitter. In fact, we already have our own handle on Twitter that you can go and follow at Footy Mailbag. And we will continue to promote that as the season winds down and as the preseason gets close. But the mailbag will continue. Guests will continue. It's just going to be a case of we're not going to be doing it for Jock Reynolds
we're striking
anymore.
out on our own. It's going to be Damo and Clarky, not under the Jock Reynolds umbrella. I think it's also important that we note that Damo and I will still be producing content in some form outside of the mailbag as well. I'm currently in the works for another show, so keep an eye out for that. That I will be producing maybe later this year or early next year. Damo, I know that you as well are going to be doing things through your channels, and we would love it if you can come along and support us through that, because Jock Reynolds is really, I suppose we'll get into like the slight mushy stuff, but I'd like to thank all you listeners, and especially to Damo, Patch, and Lek, as well as Barron, for really giving me my time at Jock Reynolds, because it's been super special. Like, I've met these guys, and these guys are like my second family, and we've got all of you great listeners, and it's so wonderful, and we would love if you can come and continue the journey with us.
Yeah, so looking back, I am so proud of my time at Jock Reynolds. I would like to thank everyone involved, Lekdog, Patch, for giving me a platform to talk footy, cricket, and hashtag Brayshaw Breakout. I feel very humbled to learn what effect I've had on the community in my short time with the website. I've only been with the website three or 4 years, maybe longer.
I think it's longer.
It might have been longer than
I
that.
am only at year 3 now, and you were here when I was a listener.
Yeah, wow. Been there longer than I thought. But yeah, words can't describe how much love and gratitude I have for everyone who has supported and interacted with the content that I've been a part of. Moving forward, and Clarky already alluded to this, I've decided to venture into do my own content, which involves a YouTube channel where I'll be documenting my season. as well as this mailbag that we have talked about before. But yeah, it means I'll no longer be producing content for Jock Reynolds, and I'm excited for what that means moving forward. And we will provide updates in due
We
course.
love you, community. I love you, Damo. Patch, Lekdog, Barron, all of the Jock Reynolds guys who listen. We love you too.
If you'd like to get involved with the mailbag next season, go and follow us on Twitter at FootyMailbag. And you can still send us questions for us to answer over Twitter if you really want us to. But until next season, we'll talk next time.